All right.
All right, Dan, you ready now?
I guess we'll give it a try.
Jonathan, are you ready? Okay. I think Jonathan is ready.
Should I begin?
Yes, sir.
Calling to order the Cuyahoga County Council remote regular meeting for Tuesday, April the 28th, 2020. Clerk, would you please call a roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Schron,
Here.
Ms. Conwell,
Present.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Ms. Brown,
I'm here.
Sunny's here. Yeah.
Sunny.
I think she froze up again.
She froze up. Sunny Simon.
Cheryl Stevens, present.
Ms. Stevens,
Present. Cheryl Stevens, present.
Simon, Ms. Baker. Okay, Ms. Simon,
Present. With George. The parrot.
Ms. Baker,
Here.
Jean, you kept breaking up, just so you know.
I don't know why. It's happened ever since they were in the chambers fixing the things for the presentation. Ms. Baker?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Tuma?
Here.
Council President Brady?
I'm here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Is there any public comment?
Mr. President, we had one person, Ms. Lou, who submitted public comment, and it was distributed to the council members prior to the meeting this morning.
And that's all we have? Just
Yes,
Ms. Lou
sir.
today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I'd like to move to item 6, the approval of the minutes. I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes for April the 14th, 2020 regular meeting and April the 21st, 2020 committee of the whole. Could I have a motion?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the minutes are approved. I have a few remarks to make today under item 7. Today we're beginning what I expect to be a series of hearings on the status of the county's finances. Today we'll be focusing on 2 areas: the administration's budget projections and the recently passed CARE Act by the United States Congress, which among other things sets aside for COVID-related expenses for local government. And it's my understanding that as of yesterday, Cuyahoga County received $215 million from the feds. Many local officials and federal legislators of both parties are working hard to make sure that the Congress will shortly pass legislation that will allow some or all of these funds to be used for lost revenue. It would be unfortunate if they are not successful, but we should not have to wait very long to find out. Next week, on May the 5th, we will continue this discussion in the committee of the whole and expand it to include questions related to how the administration plans on closing their projected deficit and other important HR-related issues. Is there a message from, I see Sonny's parrot there, front and center on my screen. Is there a message from the county executive?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, there you are.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you for doing this in respect to the distancing and all the other requirements that we have right now. I would venture to say this is probably the most technologically savvy county council that's ever been in existence. So thank you for your work.
All right, thank you. We're going to reverse the order of our agenda to have this discussion about the budget, which may take some time after we've completed our regular agenda, and Mr. Miller will chair that portion of the meeting. But now we'll go forward to item 10, legislation introduced by the executive, consideration of resolutions for the first reading adoption under suspension of rules. Could I have a motion to suspend the
President, I
rules?
move to suspend the rules. Gallagher.
Second.
Brown.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Rules are suspended. Clerk, would you please read the resolution?
Resolution number 2020-0085, amending the 2020-2021 biennial operating budget for 2020 by providing for additional fiscal appropriations, for appropriation transfers, and for cash transfers.
Move to adopt. Dale Miller. And Mr. President, my colleagues, this is the regular bi-monthly fiscal agenda of amendments for the 2020 to 21 biennial budget. Questions were directed to OBM and the answers circulated to all council members. There is a total of $21.78 million in appropriations for capital projects. The two largest categories are $12 million for sewer work and $8.7 million for airport improvements. For these, the general fund will be reimbursed by the municipalities and the federal government for most or all of the expense, and the general fund impact will be small. Other capital items include $780,000 for HVAC upgrades to the medical examiner's office and $300,000 for fire dampers. These two items are permanently funded by the general fund. The other main item in this resolution is $497,000 in additional funding for our contract for the DLR group for additional services related to the consultation to assist our planning for the new Justice Center. I recommend passage of Resolution 2020-0085, first reading.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion is approved. Resolution is approved. Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2020-0086, amending the Cuyahoga County Citizen Participation Plan required by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to comply with requirements under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act by adding Title 10 CARES Act funding.
Move to adopt. Could you get a second?
Second.
This is Dale Miller.
Hi, Dale. I think we're going to have we have Paul or Sarah here to explain this resolution to us.
Yes, Paul Herding here. Members of council, this resolution is required so that we can access a relatively small portion of the CARES Act funding, which is a special allocation of federal community development block grant and emergency solutions grant funds that passes through Cuyahoga County. It's about $2.4 million of the community development block grant and $1.2 million of the emergency solutions grant. We normally put our spending plans out for public comment by taking them to libraries, running ads in the paper, and waiting 30 days for public comment. Due to the situation we're in, HUD has authorized us to compress the comment period to 5 days, to put the draft information on our website instead of taking it to libraries, and to hold our public hearing, which will be on Monday, May 4th, virtually, as this meeting's being held today. So this legislation is very narrow. It only applies to the CARES situation. It does not make a permanent change in the way we take our public comment when we spend the HUD money.
Any questions by council of Mr. Hurtig? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Consideration of resolutions for first reading and referral to committee. Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2020-0087, authorizing a loan in the amount not to exceed $12,890,904 to the Metro Health System for the provision of services to county employees covered under the Metro Health Services Group Healthcare Benefits Plan.
Well, we only got part of that. I assume members have the legislation in front of them and were able to read through. So I hope that's sufficient for everyone. We're going to refer this to the committee of the whole for next Tuesday. Next resolution, hopefully we'll get through this one. Madam Clerk, 000088.
Resolution number 2018, I'm sorry, 2020-0088, authorizing amendments to agreements and contracts with various providers for community-based services to support at-risk children and families in Cuyahoga County for various time periods, to extend the time periods to March 31, 2021, and for additional funds as printed on the agenda.
All right, this will also be referred to the committee of the whole.
Resolution number 2020-0089, authorizing an amendment to agreement number AG 19 conceptional care services to high-risk families in connection with expansion of the Moms First program for the Invest in Children program for the period January 1, 2020 through December 31, 2021, into the scope of services effective January 1, 2020, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $774,940.
And this will also be referred to the committee of the whole. Committee reports and consideration of resolutions for second reading adoption under suspension of the rules. Could I have a motion to suspend the rules?
Mr. President, I move to suspend the rules. Gallagher.
Second, Brown.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. The rules are suspended. Now, these are the items.
20-0081, authorizing an amendment to a
These are the items that we heard in the committee of the whole last week. So if members don't mind, we were all there. We've heard it all. So we'll just move on through it unless somebody has something to add. And if they do, just, let me know. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, could you read the resolution?
No, resolution number 2020-0081, authorizing an amendment to a revenue generating agreement with City of Berea for maintenance and repair of storms for District Number 8 for the period June 1, 2017 through May 31, 2021, and for additional revenue in the amount not to exceed $1,600,000.
Got to on the motion to adopt.
Move to adopt. Miller.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it. The resolution is adopted.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. Can you tell me who the first and second was? I dropped out.
Mr. Tuma and Mr. Miller, among others.
Thank you, sir. Resolution number 2020-0082, amending resolution number 2019-0018, dated February 12, 2019, which declared that public convenience and welfare requires resurfacing Brainerd Road in the cities of Highland Heights and Lyndhurst by changing the termini from Cedar Road to Wilson Mills Road to Fall Creek Road, number 47967, Perk Company Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $3,028,622.80 for resurfacing Brainerd Road from said termini in said municipalities.
Motion to adopt, Scott Tooma.
Second, Sunny Simon.
All right. Well, again, we had a unanimous vote and discussed this in the committee of the whole last week. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
Gene, this is Trevor. I'm going to stop your video. We'll still be able to hear you, but I think it might help with the connection for you.
Resolution number 2020. Ready?
Go ahead, Gene.
Okay, resolution 2020-0083, authorizing an amendment to contract number CE 1900-152 with AEP On-Site Partners, formerly known as Enerlogic Solar, for the purchase of electricity generated by rooftop solar systems installed at various county facilities in connection with the aggregated solar project for the period June 1, 2019 through May 31, 2029, on 2020, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $624,466.74.
Move to adopt, Sunny Simon.
Second, Dan Brady. I know we had a divided council on this issue before. So I'm just going to ask if there's no further discussion, I'm just going to ask the clerk to have a roll call vote on this particular resolution.
I did not hear who was the second on that.
I was the second, Gene.
Thank you.
Dan Brady, yeah.
Okay, calling the roll for that item, Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Strawn,
No.
Ms. Conwell,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Simon,
Yes.
Ms. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Tooma,
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Resolution number 2020-0084, authorizing a revenue generating agreement with the Cleveland Clinic Foundation in the amount not to exceed $900,000 for 6 Medicaid enrollment eligibility specialists for the period January 1, 2020 through December 31, 2021.
Move to adopt.
I'll second it.
Brown, second.
Okay. That's Conwell and Brown, Gene.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I don't think we have any further discussion on this. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Consideration of ordinance for first reading and referral to committee 0009.
Ordinance number 2020-0009, amending uncodified ordinance number 2020-0008, dated April 14, 2020, which amended uncodified ordinance number 2020-0007, dated March 16, 2020, which provided for paid emergency administrative leave for all county employees and which deleted the requirement that the paid emergency administrative leave can only be used after the employee has exhausted his or her existing accrued sick leave by revising the date on which the paid emergency administrative leave will expire.
And this will be referred to the committee of the whole.
Ordinance number 2020-0010, amending section 202.10G of the Cuyahoga County Code to provide for displacement rights resulting from a layoff or layoffs within the Department of Health and Human Services.
And this will also be referred to the committee of the whole. Now we're going to revert back to item 9, which is the presentation. Michael Chambers will lead the presentation on the budget update. And this part of the meeting will be chaired by our finance chairman, Councilman Miller. Mr. Miller, the laptop is yours.
Go let him start. Can't hear him.
Councilman Miller,
He's talking.
Hold on 1 second.
He's muted.
Dale's still muted.
There you go, Dale.
I'm ready to go.
okay.
Okay. My colleagues, thank you, Council President Brady. As we continue to deal with the COVID-19 crisis in Cuyahoga County, our primary concern is saving lives and keeping people safe. I'm very thankful for all of the outstanding work being done by all the healthcare providers, public safety workers, and other frontline workers both inside and outside of government. Your extraordinary efforts are making it possible for us to get through this terrible pandemic. While recognizing health and safety is our primary focus, we also must start dealing with and planning for what will clearly be very serious financial impacts on county government from the COVID-19 crisis. Today's is the first of two initial sessions to begin working on these financial issues. Today's meeting will focus on what information we now have on what the financial impacts might look like, knowing that there is still much uncertainty, and we will also focus on the Federal CARES Act. Next week, we'll begin to focus more on the county's response to the crisis. We will start with a presentation from Director Chambers, followed by questions from council members. This is my first time trying to run a Zoom meeting, so please indulge me. When requesting to ask a question, please identify yourself, and I will try to recognize people in order. Depending on how long the presentation from Mr. Chambers goes, we may break in at some point for questions, or we may wait until he has finished his presentation. I would now like to call Director Chambers forward to present on behalf of the administration.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mason. We will do however you want to go through this process, but I had a couple comments I'd like to make. And then if, as you know, we've provided about 156 answers to some questions. I know we got that late today to you, unfortunately, but is that what you'd like us to do, is follow down that path?
My suggestion is that the director give us an initial presentation that covers what he believes to be the most important information that we need to know, and then we can take it from there in the question and answer session.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple comments before we get started, just to kind of try to frame the conversation if we could. But good afternoon. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to give you some background on the budget and where we stand right now, and what is the biggest crisis any of us have ever faced. Before we begin, I want to thank Council for its swift response to this crisis. Action which has allowed us to respond quickly to what is an ever-evolving situation. With your help, we have been able to purchase masks, gloves, face shields, and other safety equipment quickly and get them into the field just as quick. The COVID crisis has had far-reaching and deep consequences. Lives have been lost, and millions of us remain at risk of falling ill, maybe critically. 44,000 Cuyahoga County residents have filed for unemployment. When we launched the Small Business Stabilization Loan and Grant Fund at 9 a.m. on Friday, we had 975 applications by 5 p.m. that day, more than we had ever contemplated. Life as we know is no longer going to exist. It is important to remember that there is nothing sure about where we stand today and what the future holds. Because of the closures, we are projecting a $76 million deficit in the revenues due to the loss of sales, property, and other taxes. This is a conservative estimate. We have spoken to counties across the state and in our region, like Hamilton, Franklin, and Summit County. We know they are also projecting significant losses, so we're not alone. We just learned, as Council President Brady had mentioned, that Cuyahoga County received in our accounts $215 million from the federal government as the county's share of the $150 billion set aside for certain local governments. And earlier this year, we received the opioid settlement. Both are very helpful. But both come with significant constraints. Even though we argued vigorously for the ability to spend some of the CARES money on making our revenue deficit balance, we and other local governments were not successful. So the money, while it is a lot, cannot be spent on anything other than something that is necessary and directly related to respond to COVID-19. So we now are making some very tough decisions in order to remain fiscally responsible to the taxpayers. If we don't take these actions now, actions we know that are going to be painful, we're just kicking the can down the road. Our perspective on this, take the painful measures now and quickly stem the tide and spend the money in programs that support our neediest and most vulnerable, and create programs that will allow us to come out of this era even tougher and more resilient than before. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief of Staff Mason, and we'll now continue with the presentation.
Okay, we spent a great deal of time answering the 150 plus questions. So I guess we could start, basically I can pull up my spreadsheet if you want to go that route instead of going one by one through these questions. I will then take a quick look at my laptop here and just give you a quick overview of what we're looking at on the sales tax projection. And that one, yeah. How do we get rid of these guys? Okay. So, can everyone see that? Okay, thank you. What I've started off with was, as you can see here, is the 2018 collections. We had $260 million. The 2019 collections that we received. Once again, this is right off of the State of Ohio website. This is where we get our, this is visible to everybody. What we started to try and do was just come up with some projections. I did a 2-year, trying to base on what we would come up with for 2020 and what a 2-year average was. So when I came to these projections, I just wanted you to see the base information is right here. And as I come over to the right here a little bit, you're going to see our projections. So this is what we based everything on. These items bolded here are actual figures. As we get information, they're going to become an actual. The blue represents the timing that, is recorded in the month that we earn it. So for example, this is actually shows January here, but we didn't receive it until March. So that's just a lag. So what I wanted to show is the cash basis, which is on the right. So bottom line is we received 100% of our revenues in January, 100% in February. And as you know, the state has set at least 11, 12% for reduction for March. We won't receive that information until probably end of May, beginning of June. So right now I've got that projected at 85%. As you can see then going out, this was done prior to knowing anything about reopening the state and trying to, increase those factors. We estimated for the month of April about 45% collection, 50% in May, and then slowly ramping up through the end of the year. One of the issues we have here is the last few months is the impact on if it comes back again, how will that impact our revenues? Will we have to revise that and so on? So bottom line is the state, has this was our projection to collect, including the reductions, 191 million. I'm sorry, let me roll it down here just a little bit. Based on our projections, cash basis, we're going to collect 201 million this year. This is all subject to change. If I change this to 80%, you can see how the numbers go ahead and we'll update it as we get more information. Everybody's going to tell you right now that information is what we lack, and we're waiting desperately for the for the April numbers. I want to get confirmation first from the March numbers because I have not received that yet, even though the governor did say it's 12, 13%. It may be slightly different for Cuyahoga County, but the key is when we get the results really for April, which once again, we won't get that until June. So this spreadsheet is a living document. I can continue to update it as we go. And then what I ended up doing, once again, I kind of parlayed that into what's going to happen next year a little bit on our revenues. I still think that, everything here was at, as you can see, the first 2 months are still based on my last 2 months over here of 2020. But bottom line is, we're hoping things turn around and hoping we get back up to it. A lot of people I've spoke to don't believe we're ever going to get back up to that 100% anytime soon. It might take several years. But once again, with these numbers, is how we came up with approximately $53 million. As you can see, I'm sorry, I'm new on this as well, right there. Now, I know some other counties, I think that circulated around, have done some other type of a projection. If you were shut for a couple of months, how would that? I didn't like that because it doesn't take month by month. It just assumes everything's together. I know, I think it was Franklin or Hamilton came up with something. But based on that theory, which once again, I don't agree with, our 120 million reserves, if it's a 20% impact for 5 months, things like that. That was one of your questions that you asked, and this chart has been prepared for a long time. I don't like sharing it because once again, I don't think it's accurate. So having said that, we also looked at some other factors. If we just took quick estimate, 2 months, everything in whole, what would it come up with? But the most reliable estimate we have, and the one that we're going with, is this one right here. And once again, that's based on the sales tax. When you start getting into the other income, if you consider the unemployment rates, people paying their property taxes, once again, we believe that our revenues will start declining in those areas as well. I don't see if I do my one sheet. But is there any questions so far on this chart?
I do. Councilwoman Simon.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have a question, Mr. Chair, through our speaker about the 85%. What is that? This is a projection based on what? Is it conjecture? Is there anything solid?
It's based on the last 2 years. So I based it on 19. Okay. Once again, let me roll up a little higher for you. This here is based on 19 actual. This is based on a 2-year, and this is based on 19. So I took the best estimate we had was from last year. And actually this 22,914,000 was actually November of last year. So what I've done is I based it on last year's numbers and try to say, we were in a booming economy. I mean, our revenues were really forecasting to continue to increase. So that was our best estimate right there, was taking it on 2019.
We really don't know. You're just going back to last year and considering the hit we're taking, that's a bit of a conjecture. We don't know yet.
Well, this is the estimate on what's going on. We know for a fact that, the governor came out with 85%, and you're 100% right. But when you look at the state of Ohio, is putting in a 20% reduction. Hamilton County, 20%. You go down to Lucas, they're looking at 20%. Everybody is looking at these huge cuts in their sales tax. Some counties are actually looking at 40, 50% in some other areas. I know the executive has been on the phone a lot, and he's been receiving a lot of feedback from a lot of different locations. Knox County, 50%. I can go on and on. Allegheny, 40 to 60%. North Carolina, 20 to 50%. So we're relying on the best information. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When are we actually going to get real numbers? Is this quarterly? I mean, we're conjecture based on these things. When are the real numbers going to start coming in?
So if you look where my screen is here, the mouse, I've got real numbers right here. That 22 is real. This 23 is real. That 26 is real. That 20 is real. Those are all real numbers. It's now from here on down that's not.
I know. When are those coming in real?
we're at least 2 months behind. So May will not be available until July, April, same thing.
Okay,
'Cause-
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
So, Director, I was not able to see the part of the screen that had the 2021 projections. Could you give me a summary of what you projected for 2021?
Once again, Councilman Miller, it is just that. I was taking a look at what I had for the last 2 months of 2020, what my projections would be coming in at based on the the sales tax collection, and then I estimated just that things would not rebound as quickly. So I'm going about 95% of our 2019 numbers again. Still hoping that we can get back to that great year we had. So the difference is projection about 245, which is still about 15 million or so off of our 2020 number, whereas right now we're looking at about 201. And as information comes in, we tweak these things. As we find out that stores are opening, we'll start tweaking these numbers as well. But right now, this was the basis.
Does
And I
anybody
just wanted
else
you to see it.
Does anyone else have a question on this presentation before we?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Scott, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Through the chair to Mr. Chambers, appreciate you putting this stuff together. I got a question regarding the income that was coming in, the sales tax that was coming in. Were we ahead of schedule where we had planned on being for 2020?
Yeah, actually we were. You know, once again, here's the sales tax for 19. It kind of gives you if you look at 2018 was 22 million, and then we ended up getting 23 million. Now just to, you know, and this was for December, but if you come over here to 23 million, is really recorded in February. Once again, that's that 2-month lag. So yeah, we were about 5.5% ahead of schedule. Both January and February came in better.
Right. So through the chair, so wouldn't that offset a little bit of some of the hit we're taking right now?
It's incorporated in there. These are actual numbers that I have in there. The bold are actual numbers. Everything else from here on down is the projection. And once we get actual numbers, you know, once again, we will pop them in there. So I need to get actual numbers from March, and then that'll update this number right here, the 16 million that we have. So as soon as I get March, we'll update it.
Okay, I appreciate it.
And, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was asked to present how we came up with a projection, and once again, considering our financial advisor, considering we just went out again with Moody's and Standard & Poor's for some of our refinancing some of our debt. I mean, these are we've been talking about this with a lot of people, and this seems to be, you know, everyone is coming up with these roundabout numbers, and everyone seems to be gravitating towards this 20 to 25% hit. And you're right, until we get actual data and we can update this and be more reliable, more realistic, these are the best tools we have based on all the information we got so far.
Mr. Chairman, Jack Schron, you're saying it's 20 to 25%, but from December at 26 million to 16 million you're now forecasting for February, that's a $10 million drop. That's almost 40%. Why are we talking in terms of from December to February? That's a 40% drop in that $10 million number.
So once again, we're projecting an 85% hit to the original number. So the 20 million, which was for February, came in. You know, we actually received the cash April. I just need to now figure out what the governor said, 10 to 15% cut in sales tax. Well, this number here, the 16 is 10 to 15% cut. You know, if you see the formula, it's taken the 85 plus my last year's number, which was, we had a great year last year. So that's where we come up with this 8 to 16 million.
I was just going back to Mr. Tuma's point that we ended December at 26.5. And we're now at 16.4. That's $10 million in 2 months.
Yeah, let me share with you something here. This is historical data. You know, it does traditionally start dropping. I mean, here is, you know, April was up a little bit, but I mean, I'm taking it right off the historical data that we had for those months and taking 85% of it.
So to Councilman Schwan, what he's saying is that there's monthly fluctuations in these numbers, and what we get for March, which is actually received in January, probably. That's typically a high month, and so when you seasonally adjust it, it's not going to be a 40% reduction.
Mr. Chairman, Purnell Jones.
Councilman Jones.
Yes. So, Mike, all of your projections are low. So when the actual numbers come in, our deficit will decrease. In my understanding, you don't expect the deficit to grow as the actuals come in. You do expect the deficit to decrease.
I would like to hope that my numbers are close, and I hope I'm certainly not off the other way where it's much worse, and then just the opposite could happen. But yeah, if they do come in better, so for example, if we end up getting 90% here in March, that's gonna take us up $1 million right there. If we do better in April, say we get 60%, that's gonna take me up another $1 million. You can see how it rotates, it changes this number here. But right now, we're going on the best data we have, and this is what the projection that, once again, you asked us to come up with how we came up with that number. We came up with that number that was a few weeks ago, and each week we're getting more and more information. I will start tweaking this now for what the governor said, possibly for opening up next month.
Okay. But fundamentally, you're trying to project the kind of the worst case scenario. So as it comes in, the deficit hopefully is not as bad as we see it today.
I would think I'm projecting pretty conservative, but I would say there's when I look at my peers in every other county, we're all having very similar thoughts. So I wouldn't think I'm out on an island on this one. What I am concerned about is back here where I got it highlighted now, and we're looking in October. So what if that drops 50? That cuts me down pretty low. It doesn't really matter really for this year what happens in November and December because that impacts next year. But it's certainly, October is very important to us because these first 2 months, January and February, was what the state had recorded from last year. It just takes that 2-month lag time. So we're always 2 months behind.
Okay.
This is Nan Baker. If I could ask a question, Chair.
Councilwoman Baker.
The property tax that is typically in July also comes at the same time the federal income tax has been deferred to instead of in April. So to some, that could be a double hit. I don't know if you factor that. And also, I think I read in your answers to some of the questions we've asked that the property tax could be delayed to August. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Currently, we originally, when this came out, we asked to extend the property tax deadline to August 31st. The state called us and asked us to revise our estimate because they didn't want to deny it. And basically, they said that they would give us until August 13th. So we then resubmitted our request to August 13th, and we're still waiting for a response from them. But based on our initial conversation, we feel that that's going to be a realistic number or date, I should say.
Okay, and based on your answers for how much we have collected and some of those that have paid within their mortgages and all those different types of cases, have you factored that into your numbers? I mean, how did you change your forecast given the possibility that we're going to probably not be collecting as we thought we would come July, if not August 13th.
Yeah, the number we came up with is approximately 10%. We went with 10% for various reasons, but with property taxes, with motor vehicle license and gas and all those other things, there's always a bit of a lag in us, getting that information, much like this sales tax. So property taxes is when you have, I think it was almost 1 million Ohioans unemployed, most of them living paycheck to paycheck, that will have an impact. It may not all happen in July or August, but it's certainly going to happen maybe next January as well. So the property tax number we had estimated was about a $2.7 million decrease. That would be about 10% of what the general fund would normally collect.
Okay.
For example, recently, the Auditor of State put out a bulletin, an advisory, which I sent to everybody, that identified the local government and said basically a significant decrease, to paraphrase. We take in about 22 million a year on that. So I don't know how to really quantify a significant decrease, but we assumed about 10%. It could be 30%, it could be 40%. Once again, so if I'm off on one, I'm hoping that the 10% could go to cover some of the other areas where we might be a little heavier light.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Chantel here. Just
This time.
curious, do we have anything historically that would indicate people wouldn't pay their property taxes or people losing their homes is a high risk and a very worrisome thought. What are we just because this is unprecedented and uncharted territory, we don't have anything, so this is just in theory?
I don't think it's in theory. I think we have once again, I don't want to say in theory, but we have 22 million Americans, or I'm sorry, 26, 27 million people got laid off in 3 weeks. We're in uncharted waters. That's never happened. I think it's even worse than the Great Depression. So once again, to assume, good news is we had the first half collection and we've had people that make their monthly payments now. We do have some people on unemployment, obviously collecting that money, but they have families to feed, and I think that becomes a priority. So I don't think a 10% number in property taxes is really that far off, that people are not going to be able to make the payment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director, please proceed.
Well, I thought we'd take a stab at going through the questions because I believe as far as the charts and stuff, I think you've seen everything. The only other thing I was just showing you that these are just the different months and how we collect our revenue right off the state website. So everything I've showed you is public information.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Council President.
Thank you. Mr. Chambers, we appreciate all the work that went into responding to our questions. I understand this was sent over to us about 1:15 this afternoon. I think I was probably pretty fast on the draw in that I'm sitting here beside my printer and was able to get it all in my hands by 1:30. I'm just wondering why, given the nature of this discussion and difficulty of having a good dialogue, why some of these questions couldn't have come to us, why some of the answers to these questions couldn't have come over to us sooner. I know I certainly can't, digest this and have the kind of productive conversation that I had hoped. We asked some of these questions quite a while ago. There was a lot of mystery around how this presentation was going to take place.
A week ago.
And so we appreciate it, but I would like to know why some of these couldn't have at least gotten to us by yesterday, but we could have digested them in order to have a more productive conversation.
Mr. Director.
Yes, Chambers here again. I will take responsibility for that because I'll be honest with you, I was trying to get everything as accurate and send you one document. I was under the impression we were going to go through all this. I spent very little time even with my presentation here. I just gave you my live file. So I wanted you to have the complete picture, and I thought we'd be going down in order of these things. So you're right, we probably had 75, 80% of this stuff, but there was a handful of items that we wanted to tweak and just make sure we had directors available and follow up. I had some questions on some items as well. As you know, it was 150 something questions when you break them all down. So I just wanted to give you a complete answer back.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
To Mr. Chambers, that's all fine and good, but I believe the chairman asked for written responses back for council. If you want to have a real dialogue about this, we should be informed and be able to follow up with questions. This isn't the first time it's happened with council, so shouldn't happen.
I apologize for that. I did send them, albeit late, but I'll be honest with you, we were going through them up until that point.
Well,
it was a lot of information.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Dan Brady.
Yes, President.
We again, we appreciate your hard work, but I guess the upside to this unfortunate situation of how we have this dialogue today is that this will not be the last discussion we have. So, when this meeting is over, we will begin to digest these answers and be able to really look them over, and we will continue this dialogue. So, while it's unfortunate that this information did not come to us in a timely way, it will not prevent us from discussing all of these items in as many forums as we need to get the answers to have questions to our answers to our questions, and some back and forth. And I would just say that the council cannot be expected to support drastic measures when it comes to the county's finances without being part of the process. And so you are going to have to be, and I don't mean you personally, sir, the administration is going to have to be patient with the council while it digests this information and comes to some kind of a understanding and a consensus about where we stand. We are not prepared to move and do and support drastic actions in a vacuum. And so again, I appreciate the work. I think it limits what we can accomplish today, but we should certainly try. So we'll look forward to working with the administration and working through these issues. We have given you emergency powers, 6 weeks ago. We are trying to do everything we can to cooperate, but we don't really feel like we're getting as much cooperation coming from the other side. And it's hampering our ability, particularly since we're acting, remotely and isolated out here, to be able to fulfill our responsibilities of oversight of the administration. So having said that, I'll yield back to the chair.
So I would just second what the council president has said and say that when you're in a crisis situation like this, the need for cooperation and collaboration between the executive and the council does not get diminished. It gets enhanced. It's just very important that we work together on a real-time basis so that we all have information at the same time and can work through it and come to some conclusions. So I hope that that going forward we can be a little bit more mindful of that.
I certainly understand what you're saying, and I apologize again. I think we had probably 20 different people that I have sent this out to, waiting for responses. And once again, some of them people are working remotely as well. So I apologize. I just wanted to get you one packet. And I promise you, we were working up until that 1:15 making changes before I hit the send button. I was not sitting on it. I just want you to know that. So we're here to answer them. Anything else you have or however you want to do it is no problem.
So, Director,
yeah.
A couple things stood out to me looking at the information. One is that the county's reserve balance actually went up by about 11 million between December 31st of 2019 and March 31st of this year. And so could you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Sure. A couple of quick things too is our revenues came in a little higher, as you know, from those 2 months of sales tax. And secondly, as you know, the ERP with our new system, getting people trained on that and getting people using it, there's a lag. I'm pretty sure that we'll start seeing a rebound as people get more comfortable. Top that off with everything going on with the COVID. We have people working at home, reduced staff. So all of those factors combined is why the reserves grew.
So Director, can you say a little bit more about, I know that we have additional expenses because of COVID-19, but are there areas like in vehicle miles traveled, in utilities and office expenses, are there things where we're actually going to have lower expenses during this time frame, and can you quantify that at all?
What we've done, Councilman Miller, was we've asked all of our departments to take a look at their budgets, looking for both mandated and non-mandated expenditures. Hopefully they're considering all those issues. That's something that I'm still going through, still trying to get all that information in. And I will make sure the departments are aware of that. But obviously when you're remote, most of our vehicle mileage and things like that are people that are out in construction projects. So that will continue as long as, you know, the construction projects are going. We still have our HHS agencies that travel. Our sheriff still patrols. So I wouldn't see, as far as mileage and stuff like that, a big decrease. The buildings are still open. So good question, but do I have it right now? No.
So Director, the other thing that I notice is that we have 323 people that are in that category that they're not providing essential services, and also they were not able to work from home. So we've just had these people not working. And my question is that now that the governor of Ohio has said that starting on Monday, May 4th, that the general office operations can resume under carefully controlled social distancing and sanitation and other requirements. Are we going to invite those people back to work at this time?
The administration is working on that plan right now with Public Works. Obviously in this building, we're working with the guys, making sure that we have all of those factors considered by the governor. I noticed here in this building, a lot of the conference room, a lot of chairs have been removed, the cafeterias have been cleaned out. So all of those things are being worked on as we speak. And until we get to that point, you know, we'll slowly start bringing staff back, but we still have to maintain a safe distance and encourage, you know, as many people as we can to still work from home.
So I would like to now see what other questions any of my colleagues have.
Mr. Chairman, Gallagher.
Councilman Gallagher.
Mr. Chambers, no surprise, I went right to the buyout question. And it seems that the answer that you gave mimics the answer of the unfortunate Doug Dykes days. I would debate Doug Dykes on that. He was wrong at the time. Those were the best of times, and that was the answer then. These are the worst of times, and that's the answer now. Are you prepared to debate me on why not to do this with legitimate stats? These are over 700 people that can go. They would save us millions of dollars. You have to think outside the box. This isn't difficult to do. And it just seems to me that people just don't want to do it. And by saying that, oh, we can't lose people here, we can't lose people there, this can be structured any way we want. So I don't buy the argument that we can't lose people because they're so valuable. It's the argument of every division during every buyout that I could remember, and there was doom and gloom from the people that just didn't want to do it, and many didn't do it. The prosecutor's office and the clerk's office, for one, some of the courts for another. It just seems to me this is the thing to do. Actually, it was the thing to do back in the Doug Dykes days. He just didn't want to do it. Why don't you want to do it?
So, Director, you can give a brief response at this time if you'd like, but I would point out that this falls more into the realm of what we're going to be dealing with next week when we ask the question of, well, how does the county respond to the financial situation that we're in? And so today we're trying to mostly get an understanding of what the numbers are and what the federal response is. But Director, if you wish, you can make a brief preliminary response.
Yeah, I will respond as I initially stated. This is a collaborative effort on these 150 questions. So obviously I reached out to other departments. So I'm going to ask Holly who provided me that response to address that real quick.
Holly Woods, Interim Chief Human Resources Officer. So, and I want to say, regardless of the feelings of the previous incumbent in this position, the numbers are the numbers. They haven't changed. And when we look at a point we are financially, we have declared a financial crisis, to look at buying out over 700 employees and the potential of not only buying them out, but potential losses for buyout of vacation and sick time. It's not a fiscally responsible position to be in to pursue that type of program. It's a great way to reduce staff, but when you're looking at an issue with finances is where we're at, it's not fiscally responsible. And to the response of not wanting to, or the risk of eliminating or moving forward in some of those positions. So we're estimating we have 151 employees in Job and Family Services that could potentially leave. 135 in the Sheriff's Department, 89 in Children and Family Services, and 60 in Public Works, just to name a few. These agencies perform some of the most critical functions of the county. So to offer a buyout where areas that are performing critical functions and state mandated functions where you can see a mass exodus of employees would not leave us in a position where we could operate successfully and meet the requirements of those demands. Some of those positions would have to be refilled. And some of those positions would have to be refilled with individuals that would require a higher rate of pay. I mean, we are in a state of crisis. People are looking for jobs, so you know that you're gonna have some employees that'll take less. But there's a lot of factors to consider, and especially in looking at the areas where those employees can leave, it really sets us up for a position of failure if we're not intending on refilling those positions. So I can come with more data for the next meeting where we can spend a little more time diving into that option. But at this time, it was reviewed by the administration, and we do not believe that that's a fiscally responsible decision to make at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I would just note that when we were in, as Mr. Chambers said, fantastic times, the best times that the county's ever had as far as the economy was going. This was put on the table by myself over a year and a half ago, and the very same argument was used then. It was bogus then, it's bogus now. It was bogus when the 3-year buyout was done. It was bogus when the 5-year buyout was done. It's old arguments that fail. I will debate you, ma'am, and I will debate Mr. Chambers, and I'll debate Mr. Dykes on his position back when he had it. This is ridiculous. You have just sent a signal to over 700 employees. We are going to hold you hostage. And oh, by the way, don't worry about saving any money. I am very upset about this. Prepare for the debate. Thank you.
I also have a question on this subject while Ms. Woods is there, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Brown.
Thank you. I'm just a little confused. If we can afford to potentially lay those workers off, they would not be present. So wouldn't that offset some of the things that you're talking about as it relates to training and trying to rehire people? We're not, the bodies would be essentially absent either way. The employees would not be present. So can you help me follow that logic, please?
I mean, right now, we're trying to, going back to the, I don't want to use the word layoffs just yet. I mean, we are certainly looking and asked everyone to come up with their cuts. That's the last thing we want to do, and certainly we wouldn't make that move until we had a little more information confirming our numbers or not, which once again, I would say would be June. So I don't think that we're basing anything on laying people off at this time. I don't know if you want to add anything on that. Okay.
Okay, at this point, we have not had any discussion at all about the Federal CARES Act. I'm wondering if I could call upon the director to give us some background information on what we're receiving, what we hopefully expect to receive, how we're going to use the money, and how the federal assistance might impact our financial position and how much it might help us.
One of the positive things I could tell you, the application was very quick, about 5 minutes. And a week later, we got $215 million. So as far as what we're going to do with it, once again, it's still a lot of, there's a lot of gray areas. We're still trying to figure out exactly everything we can do with it. We've engaged counsel, and some of our administrative team is working with legal and other advisors to, try and see what we can and can't use this for right now. I think there's some issues that we're trying to make sure we can use this money the way we want to. And remember, if we use this money and they say we'd used it wrong, then the county has to pay it back. So before we delve too far into that, we're trying to make sure we got clear guidelines on how we can use the funds.
Mr. Chairman, Cornell Jones.
Yes, Vice President Jones.
Mike, can you give us a sense of what your understanding is of how the money can be used now? Just something brief.
You want to do that, Bill?
What you know you cannot use it for.
Mr. Chairman, so the feds just sent down some guidance on how some of this money can be used, and it has to be necessary expenditure incurred due to the public health emergency. It was not accounted for in the 2020 budget, and it was incurred between March 1st of this year through December 30th of 2020. So that's it in a nutshell. They haven't given us a lot of technical detail, but we've been working with our lobbyists in Washington to get clear definitions and clear requests. We're preparing some questions that they'll submit to Treasury to say, hey, can we use it this way, so that when we step off that way, we can be sure that we're stepping off in the right direction.
Mike, let me give you one question. We all know what happened with the nursing homes in California. Would this money be possible? Could it be used to help deal with the existing challenges that nursing homes are having right now here in Cuyahoga County, and even in a preventative way, again, for the nursing homes where the most vulnerable are?
Certainly, we could use these funds for PPE, and we've been doing that since the very beginning, before we even got these funds. We have over $6 million that in appropriations that council has given to the administration. I want to say we're close to $3 million of that in PPE and screening tests and IT related items. But as far as the nursing homes, I know that my colleague in emergency management is dealing with those individuals as requests come in. But I'll have to get more information specifically on the nursing homes for you.
Yeah, there's one nursing home that did tell me they did receive county assistance in forms of PPE earlier. So that may be going on. Whether that needs to be ramped up or not, I'd like to know. But they've also, from some of the nursing homes I've spoken to, there are concerns for, I would even imagine, technical support for those who have had COVID, who currently have COVID in their buildings. Not only technical support, but also potentially for human support in the area of human resources. If employees get sick, how do they replace them? Can the county serve in any way as an HR department, so to speak, possibly granting and helping bring employees to the table and be able to help those frontline workers in nursing homes.
I mean, those are all great considerations, and once again, when we get better understanding of the terms of the funds, I do know that Alex is not only he's continuing to buy PPE, and so we can have at least a good quantity on hand. We're considering actually building an area to contain all of this as well as part of this thing, so that when we run into this again, if we run into this again in the fall, that we're already ready to go and have some for the community. But I know a lot of what he's buying, he is handing out as they request. He is reaching out to them if they reach to him too. So I will certainly follow up with you on that.
Okay. One last thought that was brought to my attention is the social component within the nursing home. Clearly, obviously, we know for safety reasons, families cannot go in to see their loved ones in the nursing home, and some are never seeing their loved ones again as a result. What their one request of me was that potential iPads, just as we're having virtual meetings, nursing homes, some nursing homes could potentially receive maybe 4 iPads, a facility, just so they might be able to offer to the families an opportunity to see their loved ones.
I mean, that's a fantastic idea. My daughter works at a nursing home, and she does that exact same thing. She connects family with the patient. So it's very tough because they can't come see them. So certainly we'll pass that on and make sure if we can, we'll see if we can address it.
And last, I would say, if they do that, follow the need, target the ones who have predominantly Medicaid covered residents as opposed to the self-paid residents.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I don't have all those answers for you, but we'll certainly follow up.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay.
So, Council President?
No, I'm sorry, that was Councilman Tuma.
Okay, Councilman Tuma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President, for that. So I have a question regarding the CARES Act to either Mr. Chambers or Mr. Mason. So from what you can tell, does that money, that 215 million, does that have to be paid back by the county at some point? Or in some form?
What's going to happen is if we don't spend it all, we have to give it back the way it's written now. Yes. And if we do spend it and it's spent wrong, then we will have to pay it back. So that's one of the reasons why we're trying to make sure before, we start opening the doors that we have everything in line. I believe it's in my packet that I sent you was the 2 pages or 3 pages of guidelines that we received. There's a lot of room for misinterpretation, and that's why we're waiting to see, and we're working with our advisors to make sure we understand it and get clarification.
Okay, so it's my understanding that currently it can't go towards lost revenue, but have you guys considered that
That's right.
fact? If it potentially should change in any way with your projection?
I'll hold that up. Can you see it? I don't know, Trump slams, but I mean, once we get better information, in all honesty, right now it's no. So the revenue, if we don't use it, it can't be used for lost revenues. It's very, restrictive there to a certain point. And in areas where you think you can use it, we just want to make sure we can.
So you, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes.
Another question to Mr. Chambers. So you mentioned you're working through our lobbyists. So, yeah. I mean, what are they working directly through our U.S. senators? I mean.
Well, I know our county executive is, and I know that our lobbyists are as well. We've, absolutely.
Okay, I just think you would have to find out very quickly what this money can be used for. I mean, I don't.
Absolutely.
Pretty. I mean, that answer should be available pretty quickly. I would imagine.
So, to my colleagues, I would remind everybody that we get the briefing documents from the County Commissioners Association of Ohio almost every day, and they tell us about what the advocacy points are, and they've been talking a lot about this use for lost revenue and direct assistance, and so we can follow their lead, and certainly all the work that the administration is doing through our lobbyists and through the executive is the primary thrust, but we can also assist in that and contact our representatives and help with that effort.
Mr. Chairman, Dan Brady.
Council President.
Yes, on this point, I just wanted to maybe amplify some of what Councilman Tumo was getting at, but there's lots of attention on this issue. It's well known, and that's why I think it's true when the administration says this is the way this bill is written, and it's only COVID-related expenses. So we do understand that, but we shouldn't act as if we're in a vacuum here. I mean, we're all listening to everything that's going on here, and there is a loud chorus of people calling for this money to be able to be used for lost revenue. And they are senators and governors from both sides of the aisle. This is not some minority position or some wish that people have. This is a very determined effort to make this be the case. And I don't believe it'll be very long before we'll find out how this turns out. I don't claim to know how it's going to turn out, but it seems to me that to make an assumption that this is not going to be able to be used for lost revenue is looking really at the glass half empty instead of the other way around. And so I'm hopeful, and I don't believe in a naive way, that we will be able to use this $215 million or some of it for lost revenue. And that's one of the reasons I'm skeptical about going forward with plans that don't take that into consideration.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
That's Mr. Mason.
Yes.
In the guidance that we have gotten from the United States the Treasury, it does limit and says you cannot use it for lost revenue. Given that, we have tried. We have talked with the U.S. Senators Portman and Brown. We've talked to our Congress people. We've talked to our lobbyists, to the Congress. We're doing everything we can to do exactly what you want, to make that eligible. So far, we haven't had any success. Now, if they tell us tomorrow that we could use that money that way, that's great. And that's what we'll do with it. We can stop what we're doing and reconfigure things. But right now, we don't have that answer. And we've been working on these budget numbers since February. As soon as we started knew what this coming, we've been working on this. So it's taken a really complicated plan to come up to a way to try to balance it, be fair to the employees, be fair to everybody. But if it comes to pass that we don't need to make this cuts, we're as happy as anybody could be. We'll stop it, change it, and readjust immediately. But having said that, we are still going to be very aggressive on how we spend the money. We just want to make sure that when we step off and we are on the aggressive edge, that we're pretty sure we're going to land correctly, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to be aggressive spending it. I don't expect that we're not going to use this money. We're going to, and we're going to spend it on ways that might be novel to the way they're thinking about it. But so long as they fit, we want to do that.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill, and I agree that if things change, that we'll have to take a completely different look at this. I'd be a little skeptical of signing off on novel spending because I'm hoping that the spending will not be novel, that it will be spending that is necessary for the county and takes care of its basic needs, which include, very importantly, the ability to have our employees work, and particularly in the frontline positions, particularly in the areas of healthcare, but not that alone. So I'm looking at what I consider the basics of what county government should be doing. So I'm not so interested in just trying to find out some way to spend the money.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would support Mr. Brady and that point. I do think in the very near future, we're going to find out that these funds will be allowed for local governments. But I would ask the administration to contact our lobbyists in Columbus. The state's sitting on over $2 billion in a rainy day fund, and every time I look outside, it's raining. So those are our dollars, in my opinion. So why aren't we talking about that? That should be for the federal dollars. That state should have come and stood with us with those dollars. Those are dollars put there by the governments, cities, counties, not the state. They collected it from us, It's time to pay back and we need it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just to be clear, just because I didn't mention the state didn't mean we weren't lobbying them. We certainly are engaged with our state representatives, our state senators, our lobbying group in Columbus. We're having regular conversations with them to make sure that every penny that we're eligible for comes back to Cuyahoga County.
Mr. Chairman, Parnell Jones.
Yes, Vice President Jones.
And Mr. Chambers, this question is probably bigger than you, but I'd like to know if we're aware, is the executive working with or collaborating in any way with Governor DeWine and even the local mayors? I would even start with the bigger cities, Cleveland. Is there any coordination of any type that you're aware of at that level?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mike Chambers here again.
Can I come in here?
Yep. Thank you.
Executive Brutish.
I'm actually going to have to get off the call because in 5 minutes I have a phone conference with Governor DeWine. We've been in touch. We've been lobbying. We've been talking. In fact, this phone call that's coming up is with the 8 largest counties and Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Houston. And we're going to be talking in part about the exact same things you just raised. So letting you know that we're all over it.
Excellent, excellent.
So I have to get off. Thank you all very much.
Goodbye. Mr. Chair.
Ms. Simon.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, I'm assuming the answer is the same, whether the local government, our county, can get employee PPL coverage instead of furloughing to pay the payroll for our employees if we keep them on. Is that, the answer is no at this time because we're a local government?
I want to make sure I understand your question. Can we pay, keep people employed?
And use some of this money to keep them employed, similar to the businesses that have, like Shake Shack and et cetera, that's been getting money to keep their employees on instead of furloughing them, and it's a forgivable loan.
As far as layoffs, we haven't gotten there yet, just to reiterate that, and that would be probably the last thing we did. Everything we've done to date, I'm going from, once again, what I sent you guys, the state auditor said plan for significant cuts from them, so I don't know if we're going to get any more out of the rainy day fund, but he's sending out a memo saying that they're going to cut the local government fund. But I think the only thing we tried to do with the furloughs was to start it now so it was a minimum impact. So say we did nothing and we waited until June or July, it would have been a much harder impact on employees. We were trying to keep it a minimal amount out of their paycheck. That's the reason why we chose to start it as soon as we could. As the chief said, if things can change, we certainly can go back and revisit everything we've done. And we certainly haven't brought any appropriation, reductions before you guys yet. We're still gathering that information, and we're still waiting on information, as I indicated, the sales tax information and everything else.
So through the chair to Mr. Chambers, the answer to the question is whether there's a furlough or a layoff. There's no money to loan to the county to avoid having furloughs?
One of the
PPLs.
Yeah, but one of the stipulations of this money is we couldn't use it. It was already in the budget as of before March 1st, I believe. And obviously all of our salaries were in the budget. Once again, another item that we could look for clarification on. But the way it was written is, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, so we're talking about furloughs, but we don't really know whether we would have the support from the federal dollars to help us avoid that. Is that what I'm hearing? We don't know the answer, or the answer's there and we're really not exploring it in depth at this time?
We're talking about furloughs because based on all the information we had, that was the best way to help offset this loss that we're going through, that we're still trying to figure out how long and how much it would ultimately be. All of the guidelines we've got now, we got the money within the last couple of days, but the guidelines clearly say if it's already been budgeted, you can't supplant general fund dollars, and that would be kind of like supplanting. Now, if we get better, communication and the lobbyists and clearer guidelines, certainly we consider that. Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, just a follow-up question. Who says that? Who's interpreting these guidelines to conclude that we can't use this money if we're going to furlough? Because that disrupts our budget anyways. It's not supplanting the general fund. It's being used for the purpose for which it was intended, to avoid putting people on furlough or unemployment. where are you getting the guidance that we wouldn't be able to use the money to avoid a furlough?
Once again, I know I'm being sounding, if we can do it, we certainly will undo it. The goal here now is we're driving. We don't want to keep everything going as normal and find out that we have a huge deficit to make up by the end of the year and have to take very drastic measurements, including layoffs. That's the last thing we're trying to do right now. So we were trying to come up with a more palatable approach and asking for volunteer cuts to people's budgets and asking them to work and look at it, mandated, unmandated, as well as coming out with the furlough. A lot has changed since, the 215 came a couple of days ago. We're waiting on much more guidelines on how to use that.
Okay, one last question, Mr. Chair. It seems to me like I don't have a clear interpretation of whether we can do this or not. And I want to get an answer whether we can use the PPL type program from the feds to avoid having furloughs instead of just making these conclusions that don't seem to be consistent with what's available. So I would like that feedback for the next meeting. I want to hear about what we can do. The furloughs program I thought had already started. I don't support that, especially if we don't know whether we can use this money to avoid our employees being furloughed.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
To further point, so we got these guidance from the Department of Treasury, and one of the things it says you cannot use the money for is payroll or benefits expenses for employees whose work duties are not substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So I'm not suggesting that this can't change because we know that it's in flux, but that's what we've been told today.
Mr. Chair.
That it cannot be used for this purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can, thank you, Mr. Mason, but many of our HHS workers, many of our employees, I think are responding to COVID crisis right now. I don't think we can avoid it as a county, that our roles are changing as a result of the environment. So I'm not sure that there's a clear line about whether we're responding to COVID.
Okay, well, we certainly want to continue to discuss this being a very important aspect. I've looked at the regulations myself, and I think it's pretty clear as it stands now that there's little or no opportunity to use this money for payroll, especially anything that was budgeted prior to the COVID-19 crisis. But the council president is also totally right in what he says, that there is a very loud and vocal effort coming from the state governments and the municipalities and the counties to get the Congress in what they're calling phase 4 that's going to be discussed to add more flexibility to the way this money can be used. So I would hope that we'll get some relief, and I think Ms. Simon is right that and the council president that we should not go too far in committing ourselves to drastic measures until we see how that issue is resolved in Washington. Any other comments or questions?
If I may, Chair, I wanted to offer. This is Councilwoman Baker. I wanted to bring to the attention of everyone, and I know that it's more federal, but it does impact our Cuyahoga County small businesses. And I'm going to be working with Congressman Gonzalez. He actually called while we were on this conference call, this counseling call. But there is a rising issue with the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. 75% of the money that small businesses are finally starting to get, small business, they're finding out that the federal government is attaching with unemployment benefits $600 a week. So we're finding that when employees go on unemployment, they receive not only their unemployment, but $600 a week in addition to that. And for an employer to try and keep that employee by using the PPP money that they originally wanted to get to keep their employee and not on unemployment, that seems to be at risk right now, because they can't match the $600 in addition to unemployment. And that employee will lose that $600 as it appears now if they stay on unemployment, or if they're going to make their payroll. So I'm going to work through that. I think tomorrow I have some better answers. I've researched it as much as I can. I've asked our staff also to look into it, and haven't been given the best advice so far. I think a lot of it is unknown as we're talking here with our county fund. But there is an issue, and it could hurt our county council or our county business, because they will have to have their employees stay on unemployment, which will then increase the unemployment rate, and dollars they thought were going to use are going to have to give back. That's the only solution that they're going to have. And 25% they are allowed to pay for other overhead expenses they won't be able to use in this PPP program. So I know it's a lot to say, a few words, but I am going to be researching, hopefully having our local small business, Cuyahoga County employers out there that are struggling with whether or not they can even use these dollars now they've finally been able to receive them. So just a heads up, and hopefully I can report that.
I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and that may be something to bring before our lobbyists that are lobbying on our behalf. There may be some new legislation required to try to get these two programs to work in sync better than apparently they're doing now.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. This is Cheryl.
Yes.
One of the things, since I'm using the PPP program, is that we were told that if we did lay an employee off and we offered them the job back, that they would not be able to continue on unemployment if we offered them their job back at full compensation. And so I don't know why some people think that people would be able to stay on unemployment if they were giving them their job back.
Right. The problem is that when you give them their job back, but they're not working, you're just paying them what unemployment is paying them. They will lose the $600 federal money per week that they're going to be receiving with their unemployment check. They're two different checks, but they're coordinated together.
So
those people that you are paying will lose that $600 once they get off unemployment.
So if they choose to continue to stay unemployed, they will have to file the traditional way, and they will lose that $600, is what we were told. That you can't just stay home because you don't want to go back. You don't want to lose the additional money from unemployment.
The challenge to the employer, though, is that they can't employ this person. They're paying the PPP right now to their employer, but they know that once they do that, they're hurting that employee by not allowing him to stay on unemployment and collect the extra $600 a week.
I suppose we could go on for hours on that, but if we're paying a decent living wage, then if the employee has better skills and they can get better money somewhere else, then that's what they're welcome to do. You're not under any obligation to make up the difference from what our unemployment did. This is a special circumstance. We'll never be able to compensate for all the miscellaneous things. But if Dale can find a better answer, but I think we are going to have to, this is the conservative finance side of me, the person who runs a company. Stop smirking, Jack. The reality is that the market will tell us within reason what we should pay. I have a minimum payment that salary that you earn working at our company. The reality is that if they would have made more being unemployed, which is unlikely since you typically make 60% of your salary, then you get the boost. But the boost was only this special time. And so there's going to be a limit to how long you get that boost. So I think that the rational person is going to want to go back to work. Not to mention, most people are getting cabin fever. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to know about the county jail. Now that our 2,000 has come down to about 1,000 inmates, talk to us in terms of what savings have happened in the county jail as a result.
I apologize, but my speaker left. If you give me a couple of minutes, he might be back. So I had him ready to answer that question a little bit earlier. So do you have another question I can stall for a little bit?
No, I don't have any other ones.
I have a miscellaneous question.
Somebody else have a question?
Cheryl? My miscellaneous question is, do we know what percentage of our mortgages are paid, of the real estate taxes are paid through mortgage payments versus people who pay their taxes directly? So we could see how long
I had that
continue to pay versus individuals.
And that's a good question too, because that also is an impact on the future, because a lot of people do pay their taxes through their mortgage. I had it. I don't have it with me. I know it's a decent sized percent, but I can get that for you. Okay.
Because my concern is that if we have, for example, 80% of our tax payments come through mortgage payments, then the real dip, because most banks will continue to pay us unless a family is going into foreclosure, then our real dip will be off a percentage off of that 20%. Or
I have that for you. I'll get it for you. And I do have Bob back right now if you guys want that question answered.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councilman, go ahead.
County jail savings. Oh, I didn't hear the question. I just stepped out for.
Jail question.
Yeah. What's the jail question?
County jail savings.
Vice President Jones.
Yes. My question is, has the county seen any savings in the jail over the last month since the population has gone down to 1,000? And if so, how much?
So the appropriation set annually, and jail operations has been configured to operate on approximately 1,900 inmate population with the standard operating procedure. So when early March COVID hit, everybody, including the county jail, had to turn on a dime. But the problem is, even though operations turned on a dime, even though effective April 3rd, we had 6 inmates COVID positive, and on April 10th, we had ODRC suspension of sending inmates down there. And on March 10th, we went in full bore with a court jail reduction, right? So we were able to move the population. And as you see perhaps you see on question number 17, I gave you the average daily population so you could see how the average daily population of the jail was at about 1,900 in January, still 1,900 or so in February. In March, right, even though we're beginning the process, our average daily population is still 1,565. So we didn't even think of, nor would you, I think, expect that we would begin, laying off or reducing staff. But what we did see, though, was a natural reduction in certain things like overtime pay, all right, because we were able to close some housing units, right? So now we've had more people available if other people called off. So even with some of the sick leave that increased as a result of COVID-19, additional quarantines of staff occurred, people were screened out of the buildings. But because we were able to close many housing locations, especially through April, And I didn't give you the average daily population for April, but I project it's going to be about 1,020. So April is going to be about half of what it was. So that enabled us to reduce overtime. It also, should we have to go to a reduced staff as a result of these potential 15% cuts, it's going to give us some flexibility to reduce some COs as necessary, right? If we have to go there. And the executive has made it clear that and to me, and Mr. Mason has made it clear to me, and I, to the sheriff, et cetera, we're not going to do anything to reduce any expenditures that's going to put any inmate in harm's way. As a matter of fact, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, we might see an uptick in healthcare costs. I hope not, because with the reduction in average daily population of 1 month out of a 12-month period, that's such a big reduction that will definitely reduce medical prescriptions and other individual treatments for those 1,000 people that don't exist anymore. But the COVID-19 costs are going to go up. And what are those costs specifically? Extra nurses, testing regime. COVID-19 testing regime is untested, unchartered. We have not yet seen the April bills for medical bills come in on that. I'm worried about what those could look like. Despite that, we're in talks with Metro Health, as you know, to see what they can do with regard to helping us with this reduction in costs as a result of the hit that the county is going to take. So they're hearing from us that they need to help us with cost reduction. At the same time, we're demanding increased healthcare regime from them for testing, et cetera. I also provided the straight time pay. You can see some reduction gradually, though marginally, in straight time pay from January through April. Again, we believe that's as a result of the ability to cohort inmates and then not have to staff COs in units inefficiently. So we're able to close floors and pods, aggregate them in separate area in a more confined space, therefore reducing the CO costs. Nevertheless, we're talking about 1 month so far out of a 12-month period. And as you know, you don't move a budget behemoth on a dime. It's a cruise ship that you have to turn, and it's going to gradually turn. In order for us to say, okay, now we can reduce, for example, if you wanted to reduce the budget by 50% because the population reduced by 50%, you would have to be able to say that we're going to stay at 1,000 for a prolonged period of time, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. And quite frankly, this 1,000 number is an artificial number, right? Because of the great work that our partners, the courts, the prosecutors, right, the public defender's office has done to help us, and we've worked with them to get this population down to 1,000. There's some contrivances that had to have been instituted to get us to this number that are not sustainable, right? So, for example, we've held in abeyance many cases where people are on bond. CAPIASs have not been issued on low-level probation violations. The prosecutors held off on charging certain low-level offenses. All those things are going to be put back in place that you would expect to be put back in place after the COVID-19 crisis is over. So what's that population going to look like at that point? It would be a mere conjecture. Nevertheless, everybody has appreciated the collaborative efforts to get us to this 1,000. And I think there's a really nice momentum here and a collaboration that going back to the 1980s when I worked in the Justice Center that I've never seen before. So I'm optimistic that we will not go back to 1900. Will we go back to 1400, 1500? I don't know. But the budget reflects those numbers. And we can't just assume that we can base a budget off 1,000 inmates that is not realistic.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on that, as it relates to the jail, this is Councilwoman Brown. I just want to make sure I heard you. You said the money related to COVID cases would be an expense to the county? I thought the feds were saying that they were covering expenses related to COVID.
Well, I believe that's correct. As Mr. Mason said, as Mr. Chambers said, there are specific costs that we're going to need to isolate in those bills from Metro Health in the costs that we have directly incurred for the purchase of, cloth face masks like this in the jail, all the PPE, the personal protective equipment that we've acquired as a result of COVID-19. All those costs are reimbursable. I think it seems fairly clear that those costs are reimbursable under the federal plan, and we plan on taking full advantage of that, including the direct costs of medical care that relate to COVID-19, and I think they can be segregated.
Okay, so that should not be an expense that we incur as the county.
I believe that too.
Okay. And then finally, one of the things that you mentioned is that you don't anticipate the population maintaining this level in the future, and that we would return to some of the practices of the past. And I know that this would involve a lengthier discussion, but I do want to put that on the radar of my colleagues who have been fighting for bail reform and things of that nature, because clearly if it is adequate during this COVID-19 pandemic crisis to have these individuals able to be out on the streets at this time, it will call into question why we would change that pattern moving forward. So I do commend the collaboration that has afforded this population decrease, and I'm prayerfully hopeful that this is something that we can continue doing in the future. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
I would just totally second what Ms. Brown had to say, that what we've gone through shows that we can operate on much lower jail numbers than we've assumed in the past, and we just don't want to go back to past practice when this is over. We got to try to sustain as much of this as we possibly can.
Absolutely. I hope when I was talking about some of the practices that are going to return, like you cannot continue to not charge felony 5 drug cases forever. Those were some of the things that I know are going to lead to an increase in the population. There are many things that all of the partners have seen in the collaborative effort, including bond reform efforts, including pretrial services where you, instead of having a higher bond, you can have court supervised release with monitoring, right? Including an increased reliance on diversionary programs. And as everybody sees central booking coming, the vision becoming clearer and clearer, and even pre-indictment diversion becoming clearer, I see that all of our partners understand the opportunities here. That, it's been said, never waste a good crisis. I think all of our partners have not wasted this crisis. And they were able to reduce that population from March 10th through today from an average daily population of 1,900 to about 1,000 today. That's incredible, and we're not going to lose that momentum.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I heard him say that they were not charging felony 5s, but there are other tools that were used as well. I would like to know that the not charging felony 5s was not the primary tool, and if it was, I'd like to hear that. But other thoughts that come to mind that we know that they used were people were not able to pay bail, to pay their bond. So if the courts in some creative way were able to look at a person and say they're not a threat to the community, and but they're not able to pay the bond and pay their bail bond, then they remained in the courts. But in the jail. But if the court allowed them to leave without paying the bail, again under the presumption that they're not a threat to the community because they could at least have been offered bail, but they couldn't pay the bail. So it sounds to me as if they allow poverty to not be an issue in holding someone in the jail. If that was one of the tools, I would like, and I have received some information, an itemized, detailed breakdown of what they did to help us get to where we are now of 1,000, so that we don't simply say it was just we didn't charge felony fives. It was more than that. There were more comprehensive tools used, and we should all be crystal clear on what those tools were and what they did. Because what they did not do is create a threat to the community. They did not start releasing individuals who were now a danger to the community. It's my belief, and I'll allow them to speak for themselves, that they did it in a safe way to this community while still delivering justice. So I would like to, again, continue to get the detailed breakdown of what they did in this system in this time period, because it is a model for what will happen in the future. And we need to all understand it factually, what they did to bring us to where we are today.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, well, now I'll just say that I think we've had a good opening discussion. We're going to have more next week. And with that, I'm going to turn the meeting back over to the council president.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to the agenda. I know there are no miscellaneous committee reports. Under miscellaneous business, does anyone have anything they want to add at this point?
I do, Council President.
Okay.
Just a friendly reminder, today is the last day. If you know someone who has not been able to get their ballot back to the Board of Elections, today is the last day you have to deliver that ballot to the Board of Elections. It's located at 2925 Euclid Avenue. If you did not get your ballot for the primary election, you can actually go to the Board of Elections today and vote in person, but that's only if you requested it by the deadline of April 25th at noon. So just want to put that out there for the individuals who may not be aware. So thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Along those lines, I understand there's been quite a bump in the ballots that have come in late. Late being a relative term in this cycle. And I also understand that while it looked like the balloting was going to be pretty low, that it's a lot higher, and it's about half of what came in before March 17th. So it may be, I don't know, a few days or hopefully not before we find out what's going on. But it's been a long road. I'd just like to say, in terms of how we're trying to operate, this is challenging. And I know that some of the councilmen who chair committees are anxious for good reason to be able to conduct some kind of hearings. And so I've decided that for those chairpersons who want to hold some kind of a hearing on an issue, talk to us, talk to our staff, let us schedule it, and we'll use this model to have those hearings. After on our regular meeting on March the 12th, I'm going to start referring matters to committees again, and we will use this technology to conduct committee meetings. This is, we've tried to do the best we could, but this is getting pretty overwhelming, trying to conduct our regular business with these broader discussions that we absolutely need to have. So look forward to us resurfacing. And with that, if there's no other business before this council.
President, I do have one comment I'd like to make. Just like to share with you all. We all know Mr. Rico Dancy. He's been in council meeting on several. He's been a regular. He's been a regular in public comment. Well, he lost today. He lost both parents and both grandparents all in one day to COVID-19. That was early this morning. So I can't imagine what he's going through right now. But I just wanted to let everyone know and just to keep him in prayer at this time.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. That's terrible news, but thank you for sharing it with us. If there is no other business before the council, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. President and staff.
Everyone is at risk and everyone has the potential to be affected.